Hey everyone, and welcome to this comparison video between the 2018 Olympia winning version of Shawn Rhoden and the 2023 Arnold Classic winner Samson Dauda. But before we get into this, I wanted to make sure to point out that this is not supposed to be a dig at either one of these guys. I think they're both great. But yeah, starting out with the front double bicep, and these guys look really similar. They both have really good shape. They're both known for their aesthetics, both really strong in the quads. But overall, I think this pose goes to Samson. I think his vacuum approach to this pose looks better than Shawn Rhoden's flexed abs, and does appear to have a stronger lat flare, which might just be a cause of that, vacuum in his waist. You could say that Shawn Rhoden's biceps are a little more peaky, but I don't think that's enough to carry him in here, especially considering that is usually, strongest body part that beats other guys, which is his legs, especially his quads, isn't really defeating Samson here. They're more like a match. So I think all in all, front double goes to Samson. Next up, a front lat spread. This poses a similar situation where Samson's overall frame and V-taper is too much for Shawn to overcome. And while Shawn does present more separation and detail in the shoulders and chest, which I think is the case because Samson holds his shoulders up a little higher to display his lats better because they are on the more highly inserted side of things. Samson's overall shoulder width and lat display makes him take this pose. But yeah, it's 2-0 for Samson coming out of the first two front shots. Now turning to the side and starting off with this side chest here. Now this is where things kind of get interesting, and in case you're wondering, I made Samson a bit shorter because he tends to squat down lower in some of his side and back shots. But yeah, I would actually give the legs to Shawn here. The quads are still about the same, but Shawn beats him in the calves and the glute ham tie-ins and overall glute striations and separation. He also poses a lot different than Samson, displaying this pose more from the side rather than twisting towards the camera. And he's also pointing his elbow closer to the camera, which makes his arms look bigger, which definitely helps him in this pose. It looks like it's basically a toss-up in terms of who has a more developed chest, and it might just be because of the way he's posing, but I do think Shawn beats Samson in the shoulders. They do look more developed front to back and a little more separated. And overall, while it is close, I do think that Shawn takes the side chest. Now it gets even more interesting in the side tricep. While I do still think that Shawn has a slight advantage in the legs, he is known for not having the best tricep insertions, and while Samson doesn't have the best long head either, his short head is definitely a lot thicker and more developed than Shawn's. Samson's chest and shoulders also look a lot thicker here, but that might just be due to him leaning forward so much. But yeah, man, I think overall Samson just looks like a bigger, more developed version of Shawn in this shot, except for, the legs being very close. But in the upper body, I think it does go to Samson, and the legs are close enough for me to give this pose to him. Sorry to interrupt this video, but I wanted to remind you guys that only less than 2% of my viewers are actually subscribed, so if you haven't already, make sure to do so to allow me to make better and more videos in the future. Thanks. Now turning to the back and starting out with the back double bicep. And these guys are so similar, but right off the bat, you can obviously notice that Shawn's glutes are a lot more conditioned and striated, but other than that, conditioning seems to be pretty close. And while Samson's legs might look like they sweep out a little more, I think that's more of a posing issue where he rotates his knee outward more to show more of his quad sweep. And it does look like Shawn has a wider back, which, also gets exaggerated by him having a slightly smaller waist. And it's about the same in the shoulders and arms. And neither one of these guys is really beating the other on size or aesthetics that much. So for the reasons I mentioned, I do think that Shawn beats Samson in the back double. The back lat spread. Now it's kind of hard to compare this one because Shawn, I don't know if he's fully in the pose yet, but he poses it more like Ronnie Coleman used to do, where he'd stand up straight or almost lean forward a little bit, which might make your back look, larger, but it won't look as big because you're not leaning towards the camera. It's basically the exact same situation as far as the legs are concerned. Samson does squat pretty low in the back lat, which is why I made him a little bit shorter. And I really don't like using this shot of Shawn Rhoden for, the reasons I mentioned. It's kind of hard to compare them when the angles are so different, but yeah, I don't know, it's really a toss-up. Samson, because of the angle, probably does look better in the back overall, which is why I would give him this pose. He looks wider and thicker than Shawn, but like I said, probably just a posing thing, so basically a toss-up in the back lat. And turning back to the front now, this is where Shawn Rhoden really gets to shine. He's definitely taking this pose. He has far better abs separation and a better V-taper than Samson. Also, he does have better separation and striations in his legs, which is really important. I mean, it is an ab and thigh after all. So yeah, ab and thigh really just goes to Shawn Rhoden, hands down. And it's really close going into the final pose, which is the most muscular. Because the way I'm judging this, these guys are basically tied. I gave 3 shots to each one of these guys with a toss up in the back lat. So it really comes down to this one. And I do think this one's pretty close as well. I really like the hands on hip variation for Shawn Rhoden. Really does a good job at showing his tiny chiseled waistline. And it also really shows the thickness and striations in his chest. Another good thing about this pose is that it kind of takes your eyes off of his arms a little bit, which is a good thing because his triceps are a little more on the flat side. And I don't know if this is the best variation for Samson to hit because he does have pretty long forearms. So maybe like a hands clasp would be better for him to bring that in a little bit more, but these guys obviously know what they're doing, so who am I to tell them how to pose? But I do think that overall Samson does look a little bit bigger than Shawn, while Shawn is a little more aesthetic, so I guess it just comes down to what you prefer. And me personally, I mostly look for muscularity in the most muscular shot, and it's not like Samson isn't aesthetic, right? So I do think it's fair to give Samson this shot, which if you've been keeping track means that if we're going shot for shot in this, Samson does win. So I do believe that this version of Samson Dauda might have won the 2018 Olympia. But yeah, anyways, let me know your thoughts and if you agree or not, and make sure to like and subscribe for more. Until then, bye, have a great day.